Hello and welcome back to Out of the Park 23 as the Minnesota Twins. And this is our end of the off-season, beginning of the season episode. So as far as our off-season goes, our two main additions are James Karinchak and Colton Wong. Karinchak we kind of talked about. Wong I will talk about more as I get into some of the other stuff that happened. So as far as the off-season goes for some free agent signings, Luis Garcia signs pretty early on, 5 years, 152 million to the Yankees. That would have been, I think, pretty hard for me to justify. Again, going back to that whole thinking about trading for him last year, probably not something that would have made a ton of sense for me to do. I think, given that level of contract, I think would be hard to justify. Rendon also goes to the Yankees, 3 years, 65 million. Curious if there's any options attached to that. So just a vesting option. So that's, I think, going to be interesting considering he's 36 years old. But he's put up 3 to 3.5 WAR the last 3 years. I think really you're paying for this year probably to gamble on him being still good going past that's going to be a little rough. Hasn't won any awards in the actual sim. So that's a little whatever. The Yankees also have some people that they've signed, like Joan Romero's in high A, this guy Polino also in high A, to like actual contracts. So that's kind of interesting. Matzek to Philly, Jonathan Loaiza to the Mets. Looks like back to the Mets actually. Looks like they used him as a reliever last year and a pretty good one. Sort of been a reliever, it looks like, the last year and a half or so. So we'll see what they actually end up using him for. I mean, this is a little rough, I think, considering I don't know how effective he's going to be. 35 stamina says he's probably more of a reliever than a starter. But extreme ground ball with that type of movement is pretty nice. So Jonathan India gets a 4 year, $72 million deal to Washington. Robert goes to Atlanta, 7/183. I think this is the highest like total value deal. And it's interesting because the Braves are just going to use him as a DH, which is interesting because somebody that you signed to this type of deal, I mean, they're probably expecting him to opt out here. So a 4 year deal for him is interesting because they have Michael Harris, who's a better outfielder than him. I guess not by a ton, but is a better center fielder than Robert is. Personally, I would be putting Reynolds as my DH. He's not going to be as good in left field as Robert would. Robert's probably a 75 left fielder, I would guess. So, yeah, I mean, the Braves, this is a really scary lineup where 1 through 7 can all really hurt you. Mejia's not a bad hitter. Martinez is, I mean, you'll take this for a number 9 hitter. When the rest of your lineup is that good, this good defensive shortstop, yeah, this is a scary team for sure. So then if we go back, let's see. What other interesting deals were signed? Casey Mize gets a 5 year deal. Little interesting. 25, he was pretty good, but outside of that, he hasn't been anything super special. Aaron Nola gets a 4 year, $80 million deal to the Cubs, so he'll stay in division. We'll get to see kind of what would have happened if we had extended him there, so that'll be fun. Presley goes back to Philly. No real surprise there. Trevor Story gets 4/105 to become a main player on the Sexsmith Unicorns. Don't know how much I like that deal for them, to be honest. Seiya Suzuki goes to San Diego, 587. He's kind of been fine. Nothing super special. Yeah, this last year was definitely the best year he's had. So I mean, good for him having the big year on the last year of the deal. Yeah, I was an All-Star last year. So probably not what the Cubs were hoping for from him in this save, where he hasn't really been the core player that they're hoping that he can become. Let's see. Urshela gets another big deal, which is kind of surprising to me, but he's been honestly pretty good. Like, he just pretty much only has been good for Detroit, I think, overall. Where, yeah, Detroit should be pretty happy, I think, with what they got from him from that contract that he signed. And this isn't a terrible deal, I don't think either. Like I don't think that keeping him made sense for me at the time, but he's been pretty good, I think. The All-Star that he made was for me. He hasn't made an All-Star game since, but I mean this is a pretty good player, I think, all things considered. So good for him getting another kind of $20 million deal. Let's see what else. What else is interesting to talk about? Yeah, Alcantara gets a 5-year, $67 million deal, and is also out for most of the year at this point. Shoulder inflammation. So whether you would take this over a qualifying offer, so obviously it's less average annual value because the qualifying offer is $19 million. So he obviously gets a lot less, but you get the years at that point. So you probably take that because that gets you through 36. So that's probably was a good call, I think, on his part, I would say. Tyler Molly, Nico Horner gets 58. Joey Gallo gets almost 100 million. Again from Atlanta. This is just like I don't even know what they're gonna do with all these outfielders once he comes back from that PCL. Like if we go back to this again, like what do you do with him? Because you can't play him at first because you have Matt Olson. All of your outfielders are covered. Like I don't understand this signing because this is after the Robert signing. So that means they already have everywhere that he can play covered. So I don't know what you're going to do with this, Atlanta. That seems like a waste of money to me. And like Gallo's good still, but I don't understand specifically for Atlanta that signing. Let's see, where were we? Ryan Yarborough. I don't think we were at that point yet though. Where is that deal? Okay, here it is. Edwin Diaz gets 3 years to go to the Angels. Framber Valdez to Washington. Washington spending a little bit of money this offseason. Yankees obviously throwing around a ton. Whether Yarborough's going to be worth this. Looks like he's been pretty decent for Oakland, but a 4-year deal to a 35-year-old starter. I have lots of questions about that. Probably not going to be a good deal. Billy Taylor, 1 year to the Dodgers. Does finally leave Kansas City. Luis Guillorme, 3-year, 27. I think he's kind of been fine. What else? Mitch Keller gets a $10 million annual value to Mexico City. I mean, now we're kind of a lot of the big guns are signed, kind of other than Eduardo Rodriguez, who finally gets a deal here from Sexsmith. So that's sort of the off-season signings. So then as far as the Twins goes, the Colton Wong thing was very much at the end of the offseason. Like we can see, minor league free agent signing end of March. Because look at our middle infield injuries. Just everybody got hurt. I think Royce was first, and then Amaya, then Correa. Just kind of a, oh boy. Just our middle infield just getting decimated. So, I mean, Miguel Hernandez now has to be my starting shortstop. Absolutely no bat here. I mean, he's a good enough defender. I would like something more like Andres Jimenez for this little bat. But, I mean, he's supposed to be, my number 4 shortstop. Not my everyday shortstop, where my backup to him is Keani Kavelko, really? Like, a 40 overall shortstop? I mean, that's awful. I mean, next up is probably like Ethan Murray, I guess. Which again, this is no bat. Not even that much glove. Honestly, next man up might be not you. David Coppage, who's like Hernandez with the bat, but is at least a better glove than Ethan Murray. So that's probably where I would be going next. Or even maybe it's Ayers would actually maybe be. But the thing is with Ayers is I want to take him a little bit slower because I want to get him reps in center field, probably at second base as well. before I call him up, because this is a guy who's more of a kind of cornerstone piece to the team. So I want to play him a little bit slower. So obviously, middle infield is not in a great spot for us right now. But you don't expect to lose all three of these guys right away. Amaya at least is back in 2 weeks. That's not terrible. But, I mean, this is not looking great for us. We'll see how long Colton Wong actually sticks around. It's a decent enough bat. The glove is pretty bad. So, we'll sort of see with that. There's definitely a world in which I just cut bait on him once Correa and Amaya are back. But again, we'll sort of see how he does. As far as some of the pitching decisions we made, this is the pitching staff that we're going to start the year with. Burns, Marquez, Gomez, Love, and Alvarez will be our starters. Alvarez wasn't super great in spring training, so that's a little rough, whereas Austin Love was very good. He just gave up 2 runs to Arizona, didn't give up any other runs. So that's nice to see. As far as our bullpen, Karinchak and Duran at the back, along with Cano and Nardi. And then Nunez, Bentley, Moran, and Diaz will be our 4 kind of middle relief guys. Bentley is out of options, so I want to kind of give him a shot here to sort of see how he does. Otherwise, I'm not scared to waive DFA him, even though I do think there's some chance that he would get claimed. But again, I do have some other guys that are potentially interesting. One of the people to talk about real quick before I get into all my prospects is Julius Sanchez, who has skyrocketed up prospect rankings to be top 50 prospect. All of this, I mean, pretty much everything here is dark green or better, so that's really nice to see. Was pretty good in spring training outside of getting blown up by the Angels. So that's all. All this is really nice to see. He's probably, I think, the next guy I would go to if an injury or ineffectiveness strikes. Maybe Hedrick, because I would just kind of like to see him get another shot. He was pretty good outside of the Angels that got to him as well. Angels could definitely be a problem here. So maybe we would go to him first, just because of the fact that he's probably less of a long-term piece, I think, than Sanchez is. So to not, get the clock started and all of that. So yeah, I mean, one of the obvious concern points for me is how much of my bullpen is out of options. Moran's out of options, Cano's out of options, Bentley's out of options. I don't love to see that, because Nardi's not a guy I want to send down. Duran's not a guy I obviously want to send down. So we'll sort of see what ends up going on there. The lineups is, other than that, pretty much what you would expect outside of the middle infield stuff that we're just kind of going to have to deal with. Marcos Cabrera is up here because he has a little bit more defensive utility than Wallner, who I waived DFA, did not get claimed. Okay, or yet anyway. There's still 4 more days on that, but I'm not super concerned about either of these guys getting actually grabbed and claimed. And if they do, then no significant loss. So talking about player development a little bit, Adrian's up in the majors. I mean, dude's a absolute monster. Before I start simming, I'm gonna ask myself some questions about, do I just try to sign this guy to a 10-year deal right now before he plays at all? Because this is obviously insanity right here. So he was kind of okay in spring training, nothing special, but it's spring training, doesn't really matter. So obviously the concern points here is that he's not really much of an outfielder, slightly above average in left field, but this bat is just so absurd. So we'll kind of see. Danny Collazo had a decent first exposure to professional baseball. Obviously he's a DH, like not really even a first baseman. But I mean, if the guy actually ends up with 80 contact, 80 home run power, then you'll play that at DH. Hector Belton wasn't super great last year, but if this actually all turns out 60-60-60, then 70 stamina. I mean, that's really nice to see that. If that actually happens, is number 36 prospect. We'll see. Obviously, high school pitcher, who knows? Tyler Ayers, we talked about. Sanchez, we talked about. Frank Sabondo is still in International Complex. Maybe comes out to the Dominican League this year. We'll sort of see potential. I mean, he's a 40 overall there now. So I'm not going to send him there, but they definitely, computer might kind of do that as the like age out thing. Huisman's kind of fallen a little bit in these rankings. The ratings aren't quite as good as Sanchez, but I mean, this is another. I mean, both him and Sanchez were that same draft class. They were back-to-back rounds. Huisman in the third, and then Sanchez in the fourth. So it could be interesting to see both of them getting big league shots this year. It's definitely a possibility. Jalen Bass, my other 26 draft pick, along with Bolton, kind of slightly worse 3-pitch pitcher, because this changeup is obviously nothing. Again, we'll sort of see how the year develops for him. Swiderski got a pretty decent bump in his potential stats this year, where we'll sort of see what he actually ends up doing. 2023 pick, starting the year in A-ball. We're getting close to, yeah, I mean, this will be the last year before he'll be Rule 5 eligible. This is the guy that a lot of people were asking about before my scout had this jump on him, when they were asking about him as this 45, which was a little bit of a, okay, do I maybe not look to trade him? He was potentially a guy I was going to move, but the potential rating is now higher than even in 2022. So, yeah, I mean, this will be an intriguing year for him. Obviously, corner outfield, something I have quite a bit of. So, if he does develop, I might still look to trade him, but again, we'll see. Klassen's fallen down in a lot of ranks. This control is definitely an issue. He's got 3 really good pitchers. So I think probably worst case for him is that he becomes a stopper type guy, where I could very easily see him going into the Duran role if we aren't able to bring Duran back. So that's, I think, definitely a potential outcome for him at this point. He is our last top 200 prospect, first round pick last year, where is a guy who looks like he could actually play center field. And even if some of this stuff comes down a little bit, this is a defensive profile that would play in center. So that would be good to see him actually hit at least enough for me to be able to put him up through the rankings, along with Luis Lara, who obviously isn't quite the same level of prospect, but I'm still intrigued to see what he does, because his kind of timeline, and really both of these guys' timeline, are sort of on the Buxton one of, we have this year and next year, I believe, left with Buxton before his contract is up. Yep, he signed through 2028. That'll be an interesting question for us next year, because he'll be 34. He'll be 35 then after this deal. Whether or not we then look to bring him back after that is definitely a question, because he has stayed healthy the last 2 years, because we've had Royce to kind of spell him a little bit in center. So, I mean, you could see played 125 games, 120 last year, because we spelled him a little bit more even. And last year, obviously, had a very, very good year's worth, almost 5 WAR. Don't expect him to repeat that again, obviously, but we'll see. I don't have as good of a defensive backup for him this year. I have Baez kind of covering for him. He's only a 45 in center field. I don't love that. Rodriguez is the same thing, a 45 in center. I think Frelick's even the same way. They're all 45s in center field. I don't really have a guy that I like. What they actually might do here, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at right now for the team. Let's go ahead and take a look at the preseason predictions, where they do have us winning the division at 90 games, tied with the Angels for the best record in the American League. Orioles and Astros as well projected to win divisions. White Sox is the number 2 team here. Top hitters, Byron Buxton is up here. They're projecting him for 140 games, which he won't play that many. But I mean, obviously, if we get a stat line like that, that would be great. On the pitcher side, Duran and Burns. Yeah, because they're projecting Duran to pitch in 95 games. Like, that's crazy. And yeah, I mean, Corbin Burns is a guy that I'm excited to see what he kind of do over this full year for us. Let's see. In the National League, the Braves are projected to win 99 games. No other team is above 90. I mean, I don't really blame them either with the hitters that this team has. Somehow Acuna is the only one in the top listings here. But yeah, I mean, this Cameron Hayslip dude has really turned out to be a monster. I'm excited to kind of track him as far as players that aren't on my team goes. So he's already got 56 home runs at the age of 24. 70 of 75 home run power. Yeah, I mean, this guy's is a stud. So, and then as far as pitchers go, yeah, Theo Ratliff. We're starting to see more of the names that aren't just, the people that are actually big here in 2022. Starting to see some more of those names. Jake Agnos, Theo Ratliff. They're guys that have been good in this save for a little bit, but it's interesting to start to see more and more the kind of the highest end players not all being ones that are big names in real life. So that is the team. We're projected to win the division again. I think we probably will. I think that's a reasonable goal for us. The middle infield depth will obviously be tested early on. If we can do okay, that'd be really nice to get off to a decent enough start. And yeah, we'll be back for the first couple months and the draft in the next episode. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.